Okay, and hello, everybody. I'm Nancy Aureli. I'm with Community Living Advocates. I wanted to let everyone know that we had our Dunbar Senior Fair and a Bag event last week, and we got rid of all 100 bags of all of your goodies. So thank you so much. And we also are hosting a coffee net this Thursday at 9:30. We do that on the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. So please come. We'd love to see you. And to start us off today is going to be all about helping your clients prepare for end of life, or yourself or someone in your family. So to get us kicked off today, I'd like to introduce you to John Murphy. He is with Safe Harbor Wills and Trusts, and he's going to be talking about your considerations for getting your legal house in order. So John, with that, please.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy. And Amanda, I'm going to give you a personal recommendation. We have a family friend who's been with you for quite some time before he had to transition out to a higher level of care. Some difficult family circumstances, not of my making, but you guys are just great. It's a great place to visit. It's a great place. People enjoy that. They feel at home there. And you guys were just wonderful. So I'm going to screen share. What I was told was we're going to do the five most important documents for estate planning. And being a lawyer, I can't help but kind of make my own rules. So we're going to go a little bit more than that. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, we can see your. Yep,
fantastic. Okay. So the first one, this may not sound very, very lawyerly, healthcare proxy and living will. I firmly believe that in almost every case, this is the most important document or set of documents to have. Why is that? You don't want to reach end-of-life care decisions and have your family fighting over what it is you wanted or didn't want. We tell people all the time, the most important gift that you can give to your kids is that they're still friends when everything is done. The rest of the stuff is just money. And to give you guys a little background, anybody old enough to remember Karen Ann Quinlan? Right. So this is where this kind of right to die stuff started back with Karen Ann Quinlan. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but Karen took alcohol and some Quaaludes and was found in a persistent vegetative state. And her parents wound up suing for the right to remove her from life support. Wound up going through the court system, and the New Jersey Supreme Court basically said that I'm blocked here. Okay. That it's a medical decision, and it would violate New Jersey's homicide statutes if they were to remove her from care. So the Supreme Court of New Jersey eventually granted their request, saying this is really a privacy right. Okay. So Karen was eventually removed from a ventilator in 1976, but she lived for a good long time after that until 1985. Okay. Even though she was not on a ventilator. But they never removed her from nutrition, and she died. And then there's Nancy Beth Cruzen. Okay, she's a Missouri young woman who was in a car accident. She was found face down in a ditch, and parents asked to have her removed from a feeding tube, and the doctors and the hospital refused to do so. So they said that would kill her. This went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Okay. And the issue was twofold. Number one, did Nancy Beth have a right to die or refuse treatment? And if she did, how had that been transmitted to people? And what was the standard? So the Supreme Court said, yes, adults have the right to refuse treatment, but it can't just be hearsay. There has to be some type of competent evidence, inherently reliable evidence. And they said it just wasn't there in this case. So the Supreme Court said no, sent it back down to the lower court. By that time, Missouri had made their point. It went back to the court in Missouri, and the state had kind of pulled out and said, we're done. We've made our point. It has to be more than just hearsay that someone wanted to refuse treatment. And so now we start this development of putting things in writing. Okay. And this fell under the due process clause, okay, that she was being deprived of life and liberty without due process of law. So it seems to us now, well, of course you can refuse treatment, but not so long ago, that wasn't always the case. Okay. And then this was always kind of poignant to me that her dad said, I'd prefer that I had her back and that she wasn't a trailblazer. And 6 years after she died, he killed himself. So he was just so worn out by this battle. And I found this interesting that she departed on the date of her accident, but then she was finally at peace 7 years later when her physical body ended. And then Terry Schiavo, which most of us would know in our lifetime. One of the things I always hear from people is, well, I don't need those documents yet. I'm not old enough to have a living will. I'm not old enough to have a healthcare proxy. If you're 18, you should have a healthcare proxy and a living will, because nobody has any legal rights to make decisions for you absent that. And this was a case of what did she want? Terry hadn't put it in writing. So the judge was not deciding what was in her best interest. The judge had to decide what did he believe Terry wanted. And he sided with the parents. The judge eventually sided with the husband, who had said, we talked about this. Terry never would have wanted to be kept alive on life support. And this is a family that was torn apart. She had children, so her parents had grandchildren. I don't think, last I saw, they don't even speak to each other. So having those things in place is incredibly important and really the most important thing. Okay. It's really a due process clause, a due process issue. It's not a right of privacy issue. So just to get really technical and legal. Now, one of the interesting things is in New York State, your healthcare proxy does not have any authority unless and until a doctor, okay, says that you're not competent. So you are your own healthcare proxy unless you're not competent. And even if a doctor says you're not competent, you have a legal right to void your healthcare proxy. So if a doctor says you're not competent to make healthcare decisions, you can say, yes, I am. And it goes to a judge to decide competency. Okay, so it's a lot of stuff, but I'm really passionate about that because I think too many people are cavalier about giving up your civil rights to make your own medical decisions. And it really bothers me that doctors hand out blank forms like candy without any guidance to people as to exactly what it is they're doing or not doing. So we include these with all of our trust packages that we do for people. We just think it's very important. Secondly, power of attorney. Everybody should have a New York State power of attorney to handle financial matters. If you can't handle them, including a gift writer. Now, New York State has a two-part power of attorney. The first part is the designation of a person to handle your transactions for you. The second part gives authorization to that person or persons to move money out of your name. Primarily, we do this for emergency Medicaid planning, creating gifts and making trust. Without that gift writer, you can't do that. Okay. Now, New York State is developing a new power of attorney. The current power of attorney does not allow gifting of more than $500 per year total by the agent without the gift writer. The new one, my understanding is you can have up to $5,000 of gifting without a gift writer. The other big thing about this new power of attorney statute is this. Currently, banks, financial institutions, and other people can refuse to honor a power of attorney for any reason they want to. And you can sue them. And when you win, there's no penalty for the bank. They just say, oh, okay, we were wrong. Now, the bank has to give you written reasons why they're not honoring the power of attorney. And if you sue them and win, you get attorney's fees and I believe some sanctions. So there's a big change coming to the power of attorney, but everyone should have one. Again, as soon as you're 18, because nobody has any legal authority to handle your finances for you. This can be particularly important with younger folks who might get injured and now people have to take care of them. They have a permanent injury, things of that nature. So if we don't have to go the guardianship route, we'd like to have the power of attorney. So some states, this is all one thing. New York State has healthcare proxy for health decisions and power of attorney for financial. Next, a probate avoidance trust. Okay. So commonly called a revocable trust. If you have a house, you should have a trust, because at the death of the last of the owners of the house has to go through probate, which is a legal process that takes at least 7 months. Takes averages about 5% of the estate to get everything wrapped up. So if you had a $150,000 house, that's about $7,500. One of the things that came into play this year that I never would have thought of in my lifetime is, what if you can't use the surrogate court? What if for 12 weeks the courts were closed because of a pandemic? And what if they're still backed up? Okay, we have people waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for the court to take care of things. Not anybody's fault. They're just catching up. And our folks who've passed away with trust, we're just moving things along, taking care of it. We don't need the court. The court is not involved in the trust. Okay. A probate avoidance trust is great for young families, 30 to 50, 55 years old. We've got a house. We want to take care of things. We're not really worried about long-term care or other types of liability issues. We just want to make things easy for everybody should something happen. Okay. Then there's the asset protection trust. This is what we do most of for our clientele. Most of our clients are probably 50 plus. They're worried about long-term care. They want to make sure that, unlike their neighbors, their friends, their parents, whoever it might be, that they don't lose their house or their life savings to a nursing home or Medicaid. All right. Most folks don't understand how these things work or can work. The trust that we use, our clients are still the trustees. They still get their star exemptions. They're still going to be in charge of everything. Just when they, or if they go into a nursing home, their assets are protected from long-term care, subject to the 5-year look back. Some of you may or may not know, I don't know if anybody here takes Medicaid for their stuff, but there's a new 30-month look back for home care Medicaid and assisted living Medicaid. Okay. So by putting our assets that would be otherwise at risk into this trust, we can start the 30-month look back period now. So if 2.5 years from now, you need help to stay at home, your assets are protected and you're going to be that much closer to qualifying for home care Medicaid. I see Eileen shaking her head about the new 30-month look back period. One of my team members, Tammy, who runs my Medicaid department, was just in a webinar with Morgan Thurston, who is the county attorney for chronic care. And he said the state is not enforcing the 30-month look back period, at least through the end of the year, is his understanding. But that's always subject to change. So the point is, this is a preparatory item. We take our house, we take the assets we don't need to live on, put those in the trust. We have total control over those things. If we want to sell the house and buy a new house, we can do that. If we want to give money to the kids, we can do that. And so, if it ever comes up with your clients, we cannot put IRAs or 401ks into the trust. IRS does not allow it. But New York State is very generous with those assets. Once you're in payout status, in other words, you are irrevocably taking money out of that trust out of the account on at least an annual basis. Medicaid ignores the balance of the IRA or 401k, and it only looks to those distributions as income. So New York does a pretty good job of protecting the retirement accounts for folks. Okay. Last will and testament. Wow, why is this last? Well, because it really does the least for you. When we do our workshops, which we just had, I think we had 75 people on Monday at our 2 workshops. We talk about trusts and wills as part of the 3 little pigs, and the last will and testament is the house of straw. It doesn't protect your money from anything, costs you money when you die, and basically is something that everybody should have, but we hope that we never use. Okay, because if you use your last will and testament, it's going to cost money. Depending on your family situation, it can cost you a lot of money. We're doing 2 right now that are just kind of silly, but clients want to fight about certain things that are important to them, and so we're doing it. But everybody should have one of these. Otherwise, it's a reliance upon the intestacy statute, and New York State's going to decide who gets your stuff. Most people would rather decide that on their own. Okay. Now, within any of these documents, we always include a special needs trust, a springing special needs trust, in case any of the heirs are disabled, so that we can protect their inheritance without losing their benefits. Okay, so every will, revocable trust, or irrevocable trust should have at least a springing supplemental needs trust to protect beneficiaries who, although they may not be disabled today, they may be disabled at the time that they inherit from people. And you want to make sure your beneficiaries are updated. It doesn't do you any good to have a fantastic plan that said this person gets this person gets this, and then you have beneficiaries on your life insurance or your IRA or your 401k that totally undermine all your other planning. You know, if you said, hey, I want all my stuff to go into a trust for my disabled child, but your life insurance says my disabled child gets the money, that has totally just undermined your plan, because now they're going to get the money and they're going to be ineligible for their benefits because they now have too much money. So we always want to make sure we update beneficiaries. And then the asset alignment tracker. So this is ours. This is what we do. We take all of the client's assets, we put them on this asset alignment tracker, who the current owner is, who the new owner should be, who's the primary beneficiary, who it should be, contingent beneficiary. And then we give the clients a checklist of things that need to be done. Okay. So we want to make sure that the assets are aligned with the plan. So all of these documents would be part of anybody's best practices plan. I have an asset protection trust so I don't lose anything, either to long-term care, lawsuits if my kid wrecks my car, whatever that might be. I have a revocable trust that keeps everything else out of probate. I can do whatever I want with it, but I'm not worried about losing it. I have a will as a just in case type of thing, in case something doesn't get put into one of the trusts. Or as we say, if you die in a car accident, now your estate has a lawsuit, the money comes into the estate, the will takes care of that. Power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will. And then for us, this really brings everything together. And we monitor this at least every year with our clients to make sure everything's up to date, to make sure the values are what we know that what they are at that time. See if there's any new accounts, see if there's any closing of accounts. We find as people get older, accounts get closed. We don't want people tracking down accounts that weren't closed. And then if they need long-term care in the future, we're going to know, hey, this IRA was closed 3 years ago, so we only knew two years of statements. Okay. So that's it in a nutshell. We usually spend about 2 hours talking about this at our workshops. But I'm happy to take a few questions. I have a client matter in just a couple minutes, but I can take a couple questions. The other thing is I have more detailed stuff on the powers of attorney or healthcare proxies if anybody wants to spend more time than just this talking about those specific things. So that everybody asleep or any questions or?
I wanted to say thank you, and I had no idea there were so many kinds of trusts, so that was.
Oh, that's even touching. That's not even touching. There's grits, grats, grots, charitable lead trust, charitable remainder trust.
Oh my
We used to
gosh.
talk about a trust is a car, right? So Nancy, you tell me you need a trust, and I would say, or tell me you need a car. I'd say, what are you using it for? Well, I like to go to the mountains. Okay. How many people are going to the mountains? Well, me, my husband, 3 kids, and 2 dogs. Okay. Is it just you or no? We take our pontoon boat and you know, and our, okay. So now I know you need a big vehicle, right? So all depending on what you want to do, that tells us what type of trust you need.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, a question about a power of attorney. They become null when the person dies, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Power and healthcare proxies obviously end when you die. your will would take over financially if that's what you're relying on. But there's an interim period where your will doesn't work either until it's submitted to the court for probate and it's approved by the judge as to form and process. And
That's what I was wondering about, is that interim period, if somebody needs to, say, access a checking account. If they have the power of attorney is no longer valid, the will hasn't been processed. What
right.
the heck happens in that interim period? Yep.
Right.
And the people who are waiting for the money just have to wait.
Yep. Versus if you have a trust, the successor trustee now takes over automatically without any court intervention.
Okay.
So a trust, I always say it's like a company, right? You have a succession plan in place. The president dies, the new president takes over. You don't need a court intervention to approve anything. And remember, the court is not approving who you're giving stuff to. The court is approving whether or not the will was done correctly. So we have one right now. The will was signed a week before the woman died. She had a will in place for 35 years. Suddenly it changed, and you guys will all appreciate this. She was 2 days into her morphine and fentanyl regimen in hospice. And the attorney's trying to say that she was competent because he asked her a series of yes/no questions that she just, at 89 years old, 92 pounds, dying from cancer, on fentanyl and morphine. What is, she's not going to say anything other than yes, is she? Nope. You know, so that's what the judge has to decide, is whether or not the will was accurately and properly done. So we have another one now where the gentleman excluded his wife. They've been separated for a long time, but he says legally, she says, no, I never signed that agreement. So we have a handwriting expert says she never signed the agreement.
Wow.
And so she's the surviving wife. If we win, she gets a third of the estate, no matter what the will says. So it can be fun, but it's taxing on the clients. So you do it right. Trusts are easy. They're more money up front, but they save money, time, effort. It's just easier. So it's a gift for the client. Okay. Did somebody say they're up in Watertown or North Country area? No. Okay. Because we're having some workshops coming up there. I think Nancy might have been to one of our workshops, but
Not yet.
okay. Well, why not?
I will be. Well, I'll
We
let you
just
know
had a
when I
bunch-
get there.
Yeah, we just had a bunch of people at the embassy. It was great. They do a great job down there. So, all right. I have to run for a client. So I appreciate all of your time. And I will if you have any other questions, just ask Morgan and I can give you a call or reach out to you via email or whatever if you need any information from us. Okay. We also do get people eligible for and apply for either community Medicaid, at-home Medicaid, assisted living Medicaid, or nursing home Medicaid. Okay.
Thanks,
All right.
John.
Thank you so much.
Time.
Yep. Oh, trust. I do have a thing from Lisa. Our costs are fixed. So Lisa wanted to know about the trust. Lisa, how we get paid is we have a 5-step payment plan. A basic revocable trust, it starts at $32.50. That includes 2 wills, healthcare proxies, power of attorney. And if you wanted to do a basic asset protection trust, it's $49.50. If you want to do 2 trusts, which a lot of people we do the $49.50 and then half of $32.50, which is what, $16.25. So our prices are fixed, not dependent on how much money you have. Okay, because our work is pretty much the same. That's not fair to charge it on how much money you have.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. All right. Next up, we're going to have Donna Whitbeck from Newcomer Funeral Home. Thanks, Donna.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
So we're going to talk about funeral planning, which is my role here at Newcomer. To do funeral planning in New York State, you have to be with a licensed funeral director. So I have been a licensed funeral director for over 20 years and working with Newcomer in this role as my primary role. I jump in here and there to do other at-need things as well, but this is my role here. And I love funeral service and I'm pretty passionate about it for no other reason that it's my calling. more than just a job and a career. It is my calling, and I love my profession. So that being said, the biggest thing when it comes to funeral planning that I would say, and I think I came up with 5 or 6 different things to just kind of go over, was talking about it. And I know talking about funeral planning and our end of life, especially for ourselves, can be rather difficult. But it's important to know because what you want, because if you are not expressing what you want, then you have family members at a very stressful time trying to make decisions. I go to my own personal experience of when my dad passed away a couple of years ago. Now, I've been a funeral director for a long time, know exactly what to do next, but I had no idea what he wanted. And it was very frustrating in that piece of, yes, I honored him, but did I ever do exactly what he would have wanted? And that I will never know. But this is why I am very motivated about have those conversations with your family as to what is important to you, so that we can implement a plan and make it exactly what you would want. And we're honoring you that way. And then emotional overspending doesn't come into the picture where we feel like, well, if I really loved my dad or my mom or whoever that person is, I should be spending all of this money. And unfortunately, that's what can happen when we don't educate ourselves. Funeral planning is a difficult topic, but it's also, it is a business. And so if you are not an educated consumer, then you are likely to make decisions that would not be ones you would do under the best circumstances, where you're educated, you're calm, you're not exhausted and just being blindsided with something that we have hard time cognitively wrapping our heads around. So talking about what's important to us, and then go even further and educate yourself as a consumer. And then you're going to give your family peace of mind that they've honored you, as well as they've done the right thing. One of the things that I meet with families, they all find out that what is important to you. What are your negotiable items? What are your non-negotiables? And I call them non-negotiables. Folks either definitely want to be buried or they definitely want to be cremated. And so those are those non-negotiables. The negotiable ones are the things of, well, I want my casket closed, or I'll be meeting with individuals who are veterans, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter to me about having the military present or those pieces, and yet to their survivors, it may be extremely important. And so we have to identify what is it that we can find a compromise. So those negotiable, non-negotiable pieces, I think, are just as important, because we really want to make sure that we're honoring you and giving your family what they need on their journey to grieving. And so, it's about you, but it's for the living. And so we have to balance that in making sure that what we put in a plan includes those items as well, too. I'm a big person on Talk to a Funeral Director. We are experts, and we should be considered the experts in this piece. So if you want to know about funerals, don't talk to your neighbor who just had an experience, or I went to that funeral home because so-and-so is calling ours. Go talk to the experts. Go talk to a funeral director. In New York State, a funeral home cannot charge you for a pre-arrangement conference. So there is no reason to bring your checkbook. And furthermore, there's no reason to surrender personal information about you to just get information. I know I work with a lot of amazing colleagues, and yet it's often those inconvenient, I've got to make pre-arrangements today. Hold them to task and ask them the questions, and make sure that they provide you with what you need. You do not have to surrender personal information to a funeral home to get pricing and what you're looking for, and to get questions answered for what type of service you're looking for. There's a lot of different options that are available, and there's a lot of misperceptions as to, well, I want to be cremated, do I have to be embalmed? Do I have to have this if I want that? And this is where you should have that conference with a funeral director, so that they can ask the questions to get you to that place of what is it that is specific to your wants and needs. What type of merchandise would be necessary in those selections. And all of those pieces of information to get you to that bottom line, so to speak. You know, I'm a big, you know, this phrase has always been my go-to. With information, decisions make themselves. And if we don't have enough information, we can't make the best decisions as what's important for us as far as that funeral planning piece. So go talk to a funeral director and educate yourself as to what it is specifically your picture looks like. When we talk about funeral pricing, to me, it's important to know how is funeral pricing established. So in 1984, the FTC began overseeing funeral pricing and created in 1984 what's called the funeral rule. And the funeral rule is the paramount guideline to regards to how is funeral pricing structured. Every funeral home has what's called a general price list. This is a required document. It should be presented to you whenever you are either making arrangements or when you want to discuss any type of arrangements. This is our guideline that we have to utilize in charging you. I often joke, and it's not funny, but Liberty Mutual stole my line when I say you only pay for what you need, and that's exactly true with funeral pricing. A funeral director will ask you questions. What type of service are you looking to have? And what are those necessary selections, as well as what do those charges look like? So it's important to know that we are held to a guideline and a structure that is to benefit you, the consumer. It's not on a whim, well, today I'm going to charge this person this, and tomorrow I'm going to charge them something else. Sometimes we use language that can be a little confusing. So when we talk about funeral home services, immediately you're thinking, well, no, I don't want a funeral service. But I want you to think about funeral service charges as what we're providing in the way of service: transportation, bringing you into our care, preparations, supervision of services and facilities and things of that nature. That is where you're going to get the services charges as far as what is that funeral home providing in the way of services. And then you're going to have merchandise, and what are those cost selections? So if you are having a traditional burial, you'll have a casket, potentially then a vault or an outer enclosure, and that's sometimes required by a cemetery. If you're being cremated, there will be a cremation container that would be required because of the crematory wanting your body received in a rigid container, so cremation container, or maybe an urn, and that is after the cremation takes place, that permanent vessel. So having that background and that information as to what is needed then, this is what I want, what is then needed. And then lastly, when we talk about cash advances, and that's a confusing term too. So unfortunately with funerals, it's already a delicate topic, and then we throw in some confusing terms to keep you all on your toes. Cash advances are those third-party charges that we incorporate into your invoice to then say, this is what your big picture looks like. Items for that under that cash advances, cash disbursement would be cemetery charges, crematory charges, newspaper notices, certified copies of the death certificate, engraving of headstones, things of that nature. So we're just basically paying those funds forward, and that's what's called cash advances. So with funeral pricing, it sounds confusing, but when you go through the process of identifying the type of service you want, and then what are those correlating charges, it becomes a very simple mathematical process. What happens to the money? So that's my job here. I do pre-planning, and the state of New York has made it very simple and easy. This is the only thing in the state of New York that's simple and easy. When it comes to your money and funeral pre-funding in the state of New York, remember this, that no funeral home has right or entitlement to your funds until they actually provide funeral services. But we need to make sure that those funds are available. We can claim those for payment, but they are never the property of that funeral home. Even if you meet with a funeral home, you do your pre-arrangements, you write them out a check, those funds have to be placed into an interest-bearing account. And funeral homes can use a couple of different options. Some will use local banks where they will open CDs. So, and then specific burial line items. Some will use pre-plan, which in New York State is a funeral trust program with the New York State Funeral Directors Association. Some will use, and there's another company out there, I think it's called Consolidated Funeral Funding or something. It's out of Connecticut. But that being said, no matter where those funds are placed, they have to be in compliance to the laws in New York State, which basically it's your money, it's your property until you actually die, and a funeral home provides those services that you have created to have take place. Now, I say all of that, there's a couple of components that are important to know too. So yes, it's your money, it's your property. I'm going to throw in a confusing piece of when we're talking about Medicaid and irrevocability. When we're talking irrevocability, that means non-refundable for cash. Now, still, any funeral home can provide those services and request those funds for payment, but that's exactly all that can really happen to those funds. Those funds are specific for that funeral, cremation, whatever it is that you have determined you wanted for yourself. So irrevocability is no longer considered a cash asset in the Medicaid purposes, but it has to be used for your funeral. And you can't pad that account thinking, well, if there's surplus, I can give that to my family. Any surplus funds go back to the county and where that death occurs. So it's very specific rules to irrevocability. In most cases, if you are doing a pre-funding of a funeral trust account, we would open it revocable, which means refundable for cash. And that way there, if you were to leave the state of New York and or just wanted your money back, you would receive all of those funds, including any interest earned. Why is this important to you, and why do I say it's simpler in New York? And that's because as a funeral home and a consumer, those are the only two parties involved with funeral planning and funeral funding. Funeral home, consumer. Say you were to leave the state of New York and you wanted to take your funds with you. You can have your money back in a revocable situation. With a Medicaid situation and irrevocability, it can be transferred to the care, so to speak, of like another funeral home could see those funds. Still can't touch it, but they could see it. Say a funeral home went out of business. Now that doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. And what happens to your money? Absolutely nothing. I think 95% of the time I meet with folks when they are actually funding their funeral services, that is the question that they'll get to at some point. What happens if you go out of business? Nothing. Nothing happens to your money. It is your money. It is your property. It's just in a very unique account that we can claim for payment. So you are protected. There is no risk to you as a consumer. In New York State, you cannot have a funeral home be a beneficiary to an insurance policy. But that is different when we are looking at maybe assigning those as insurance benefits to pay for it. Big difference between assignment and beneficiaries. So in New York State, a funeral home cannot be a beneficiary. So those are also very important things to know. And again, I'm trying to circle back to all of the questions that I get asked in a conference and how many times people will have misleading information and then they're just not being well served as a consumer making decisions because they trusted the wrong source to make decisions with that information. Now, another thing is if you fund your funeral home charges, will they guarantee those services? As I mentioned, those funds going into an interest-bearing account. Typically what happens, and because again, it is a business, so what would happen is when the death occurs, the funeral home is going to use their current pricing. Now, if interest has not kept up with inflation, the funeral home can request additional funds to then cover those expenses. If you are pre-planning and pre-funding, that funeral home has to provide you with an agreement, and that would clearly disclose whether or not they are going to honor what interest has been accumulated to offset any future cost increase. So having a guarantee to your pre-planning funds is extremely important. And I don't know of a lot of funeral homes that are capable of doing that because really interest out there is not, it's not keeping up with inflation. So that would be an important piece to ask that funeral home is, will they guarantee this? It does not mean that they're going to hold their pricing at today's day and you're not going to pay the current charges, which is often a misperception of, well, these are now locked in. That is not a valid thought. You cannot lock in those prices as much as you can protect your family in the future with that guarantee. So ask the funeral home, will you guarantee this, and what does that mean? And have them explain that to you so that you can feel a little more protected as a consumer. Okay, I think I've covered all that. A little bit of a agenda assignment. I think one of the last things that, if you remember nothing about funeral pricing, funeral arrangements, funeral pre-planning, nothing I thought of, you can pre-arrange your funeral without funding it. Sometimes people feel like they have to have money to actually document their wishes. That is not true. You can meet with a funeral director even multiple times, and at least then see what your services look like and what does that cost, and then document what it is you would like that funeral home to provide in the way of services when your death occurs. And that doesn't have to cost anything to you up front. You may have an insurance policy that's going to cover those expenses, so don't let not planning keep you because of the funding piece. Pre-arrange that funeral, talk to a funeral director, and not worry about that funding piece at that moment, and then find out what it's going to cost and how does that play out with insurance policies and making payments on it. And yes, you can make payments on funeral arrangements. So the last thing that I definitely wanted to talk about today was what's called an appointment of agent to control disposition form. One of the things that John mentioned was power of attorney and healthcare proxies. Those are wonderful, important documents that you should have in place prior to your death. Absolutely, before you're even sick, before you have the least health issue, before you age to a point where you cannot make decisions, you should have those documents in place. I'm a firm believer in that. I talk to people about, if you don't have a power of attorney, you don't have these documents in place, do it, because you are actually protecting yourself when you can no longer speak for yourself, but you may be here. Another, and I think just as important document, is who's going to follow your wishes when you pass away. Sometimes families have interesting dynamics, and that said, New York State has created a hierarchy of who's in charge of your body when you pass away. Now remember, your power of attorney has ended because you passed away, your healthcare proxy has ended because you passed away, but who's in charge? Remember the will situation. Wills can take time to be put into effect. So who's in charge of your body when you pass away? In certain situations, the hierarchy that exists is completely sufficient. It goes down from the person appointed in the legal instrument down to spouse, domestic partner, children, parents, keeps going down so we get further and further away from the tree, so to speak, the family tree. That being said, all children are considered equal. There's no age factor to I'm the oldest, I'm naturally in charge. Keep in mind, if you are legally married and separated, your spouse is above your children. And so we can sometimes have frustrating discussions with families because they come to us, yes, mom and dad are still married, they haven't been together for 20 years, but we're now guiding them to say, well, guess who's in charge? In the situation where a person has determined cremation is what they want for their disposition, that is an irreversible process that most funeral homes are going to tread cautiously to, because if someone has the right of disposition and they are not considered, then you have a potential litigation issue after the fact. You took away my right and cremated someone when that was not my wish or what I would have wanted. Now, your next of kin can actually do exactly what they want, whereas an agent, and that's what we're getting to. So an agent is where you, and this is what it looks like, it's a 2-page legal document, it's a state of New York document, not a Newcomer document, but I did this for you too. So it is called an appointment of agent to control disposition of remains. It is a New York State document. It is a legal instrument. When implemented properly, this will give whoever you choose to appoint full control over following your wishes. I frequently use the example of, you know, mom has a son that's gone wayward, but she has a daughter she knows will follow her wishes. Mom wants to be buried. The son says, absolutely not. I could care less about that. Mom funded this. We're going to cremate her and we're going to get the refund. And that sounds crazy, but it can actually happen. Without having appointed somebody as your agent, your next of kin can choose to do what they really want to do, believe it or not. An agent is required by law to follow your wishes. So you can appoint someone, whether it stays on the family tree and kind of bypasses individuals in that hierarchy, i.e. a spouse you're still legally married to, or maybe a grandchild over an actual child. You can appoint a friend, individuals who may not have a family tree, so to speak. We're an only child, they never had children, they don't have nieces or nephews, and we're now looking at them like, well, who's going to direct the funeral home? And this is a very important topic. So if you remember nothing, remember that agent forms are going to be the biggest benefit to any individual that wants to ensure that whatever their wishes are, they are followed. And that's because an agent is required to do that. An agent is not going to be held responsible for what happens to the stamp collection, the baseball collection, the assets. That is not what an agent's job is, nor role. It is strictly who has the authority to direct that funeral home into following those wishes that you have established. And I think in a nutshell and in a very short period of time, I tried to cover a lot of the things that I experienced, and most importantly, give anyone at least a little more insight as to what happens in the funeral planning process, as well as that agent form piece, because it really does save a lot of headaches prior to someone being at end of life, prior to finding out that now we have to go find family members. And sometimes with agent forms, it's dynamics of logistics. I have 6 kids and they're all over the United States. And this is my son who lives here, who's going to make sure everything's taken place. Appoint that one child as your agent, and then they can move forward. There's no contention between the children as much as sometimes it's a simplistic logistical resolution to what could potentially be now stressful. We have to notify all these children. We have to send documents to those children. And that way there, it's a little easier. Have I left anything out? I don't know.
No, I think you did great. Thank you.
Any questions? Oh, thank you, Eileen.
Donna, would you do me a favor and put your email in the chat just in case someone would like to ask you something, you know, maybe not in front of everybody?
Absolutely. And know that at the end of the day, I love funeral service. And I'm here to answer questions as a funeral director, although I do work for Newcomer. I love my profession. And so never hesitate to reach out to me. And I have a question. You know, I live somewhere further away, and that's our family always used that ABC funeral home. Absolutely. You've got to go with where you're comfortable. But you also know that it's a tough topic, and sometimes we just need straight answers. So that is definitely what I love to do. Where am I at?
All right. Well, thank you, Donna. We're going to move right on and have Ken Maag with Edward Jones talk to us about our financial house and how we can get that in order.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. So one of the biggest concerns people have is, you know, am I going to have enough money and is it going to last? And, you know, just to reflect on what we've heard so far, you know, you definitely need some professionals in your life. And we say at Edward Jones, the 3 that we concentrate mostly on is the financial advisor, obviously, your estate planning attorney like John there, and also a tax advisor. All 3 of those people look at your finances, look at your life in a different manner. And so it's really important to have all 3 of those as part of what you do. Just like John said, I encourage you to make sure that you have beneficiaries on everything and that you've made sure that they're updated and you've got everything the way that you want them, because otherwise it can really cause a lot of problems and issues. So when we talk to our clients about their retirement, about end of life, whatever it may be, this circle applies no matter what stage you're in. Where am I today? Where would I like to be? Can I get there? How do I get there? And how can I stay on track? And it's a circle because you're always going to have things that happen in your life that might bring you back to square number one. You get married, you have a child, you lose a job, you retire, you know, whatever it may be. You always need to know, where are you? Where do you want to be? Can I get there? And how do I get back on track? Okay. So what can derail some of these things? Life expectancy, inflation, expenses. There's a 60% chance that a 65-year-old couple will see one spouse reach the age of 90. That's 25 years in retirement. Have you planned for that? Inflation, a reasonable average of inflation rate is about 3%. Over 25 years, those 25 years between 65 and 90, that means your expenses can double during that time period. And then your expenses, one of the biggest expenses in retirement is healthcare. Out-of-pocket expenses could total $13,000 a year for a retired couple. So have you put that into your planning for retirement and for your investments? Okay, so what can you do? You can plan for the expected, okay? The best way to develop this plan is defining the word expected. So what is going to be expected in your retirement? So you need to picture your retirement. What's it going to look like? Are you somebody that just, you know, enjoys being at home, sitting on the porch, watching sunsets, watching TV? Your retirement's going to look a lot different than somebody that might want to travel the world or has grandchildren all over the country and you want to go visit them on a regular basis. Maybe you like to go out to dinner a lot. You know, so you really need to define what your retirement's going to look like. And even, you know, as you get older, you know, where do you want to be? Do you want to be in a senior community? Are you somebody that likes to be around people and associate with people? Do you want to have a townhouse so that you don't have to take care of the outside of your home? Do you want a ranch so you don't have to climb stairs? So there's a lot of things that you have to define that are really going to take into account what your financial resources need to look like. Okay. So how much will it cost? The best thing that you can do is create a budget, okay? And those are going to have necessary expenses such as possibly rent or mortgage, taxes, different things like that. And then, you know, I mentioned some of your discretionary expenses. How often do you like to go to the movies? How often do you like to go out for meals? Do you like showering your children and your grandchildren with gifts? So I really encourage everybody to sit down and do a budget. And if you can, do it with your spouse, okay? Sit down with them, go through it, make sure you're both on board. Because if your spouse says, well, he's gonna go golfing 7 times a week and you're not down with that, that could create some tension, some issues. Or if your spouse says, well, I'm gonna go out with my girlfriends 3 nights a week for dinner and wine, again, that may not be something that both of you agree to and would think is part of your budgeting. And everybody hates this word, which is taxes. You really need to develop a withdrawal strategy using your financial advisor because a lot of what we do, even though we say we can't give tax advice, we're not a tax person, comes down to the end of taxes. Where can you pull money from that you're not going to give a lot of it back to the government? So a financial advisor can really help you make those decisions, especially as you get older, especially as you start making withdrawals from 401ks, traditional IRAs, pension plans, Roth IRAs, all those different kinds of things. Okay. Where will the money come from? Well, I just mentioned a whole bunch of them. Social Security, pensions, maybe a part-time job. That's all considered outside income. And then the rest of it's going to have to come from your savings and investments, which could be 401ks, IRAs, savings, stocks, brokerage accounts, all those different things that you could possibly have money in. The income gap becomes where you have your expenses. So that's your rent, your car payments, going out to dinner, all that other kind of stuff, minus your income. Okay, again, that's Social Security, pensions, part-time jobs. The result of that becomes your income gap. And your income gap is, okay, how much money now every year do I have to take out of my retirement accounts for me to live the lifestyle that I want to live? So you talk about withdrawal rate. I've heard numbers thrown around. Oh, yes, I'm going to take 5% of my retirement account out and I'm going to be fine and I'll never have to worry about anything. Well, that may not be necessarily true. Again, it's very personalized on what kind of life that you want to live, how much money you have in retirement, how much of that retirement is going to be considered taxable. But there is a general guide of, in your early 60s, you could plan on maybe taking out 3% if you want to be conservative, 4% if you're a little less conservative. When you're in your 80s, taking out 6%, and then 8% in your 80s. So look at your 401k right now. If you only have $100,000 in your retirement account and you were going to retire in your early 60s, you would only have $3,000 a year on top of your Social Security, your pension, and a part-time job maybe that you could actually spend without taking out more than that withdrawal rate. $3,000 isn't a lot of money spread across a year. So you want to make sure that you're putting enough away, that you're working with an advisor to have a plan so that we can take all these things into account. So your reliance rate. The more you rely on your portfolio, the more sensitive you are to market fluctuation. So basically what that means is if you have a very small Social Security payment and you're taking 6, 7, 8, 9% of your retirement accounts out every year to live, and all of a sudden we have an event like we did last March with COVID and the market dropped 20, 30%. And all of a sudden your $100,000 retirement account dropped from $100,000 to $70,000. And now you're still pulling out the same amount of money because you need that money to live. That can be a big problem. So again, you have to have a plan. You have to be working with somebody that understands how the market works and how that reliance rate can really affect what your future might look like. So what are some possible trade-offs to sort of reduce your reliance rate on your retirement account? Well, you can reduce your spending goals, but sometimes we can't do that. Sometimes people are living bare minimum. They have to pay their mortgage. They have to have a car. They have to pay their taxes. They can't really reduce their spending goals. They may want to delay retirement. Some people I have come in and say, I'm going to work forever. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Sometimes the body gives up, sometimes the mind gives up, and sometimes just the desire to work gives up as well. And again, some people say working part-time, that could be a trade-off as well. But again, sometimes you don't have the ability to do that. Maybe you don't have a skill set. Maybe your body's not going to allow you to work part-time. But you do have to have some flexibility if you're going to have too high of a reliance rate on your retirement accounts. So we talked about preparing for the expected. Now we want to talk about things that are unexpected, because as much as you might want to plan, there's always the possibility that our plans don't go as expected. So how can we plan for the unexpected? Well, there's really only two ways that we can do that. We can either incorporate plans into our major plan or insure. You can either incorporate unexpected elements into your strategy by including them as expenses in your budget, or insure against them. And there's several different kinds of insurances that you can consider, such as life insurance, long-term care, or products such as annuities. And I'm not going to go into any of those today. But again, there's those unexpected things that are going to happen in our life. So you either need a budget, sort of an emergency fund that you can use, or you need to insure against them. And that's where life insurance, long-term care, and annuities come into play. So here's some options to consider. You can manage your spending. You can budget for your Medicare and health insurance. You can include health expenses in your budget. You can consider supplemental health insurance, or you can consider adding long-term care or life insurance. The one thing is that you have to position your portfolio for both the expected and the unexpected, and most people on their own don't know how to do that. Growth still matters. I just had somebody call me yesterday. They're in their 50s and whatever, and they said, "Oh, well, I'm going to retire soon, and I've got $100,000, and I think I'm going to live for 10 years. So I'm just going to divide it by 10, and I'm going to take out $2,000 a year, and that's going to be my retirement." Well, that's not a good plan. So you've got to worry about inflation. The cost of goods are going to go up 2 to 3%. So if your money is not making money, if you just pull out your money and put it in a bank and let it sit there and not grow, you are not going to be keeping up with inflation. And even if your original plan, you thought you had enough money to make it, if your money's not growing, you're not going to keep up with inflation, and your plan's not going to work. You need to maintain a balance of both equities, which are stocks, and fixed income, which are bonds. And that's what we help you do. When you're in your 30s and your 40s, you're probably going to be 80-90% stocks and 20-10% bonds. Once you get into your 50s and 60s, you might be at a 50-50 type of portfolio. And then when you get in your 70s, 80s, you're going to be the majority of fixed income, but you still need some equities, especially these days where CDs are paying less than 1%. Money markets are paying 0.1%. You need some equities in your account. Right now, AT&T is paying a dividend of 7%. You can't find 7% in a bank anywhere. So you need to make sure that you're maintaining that balance, and everybody's balance is a little different. It's going to depend, again, your lifestyle and how much you've saved for retirement. Okay. And then your review. You need to sit with your advisor at least once a year. If you've got a retirement account or an advisor and you haven't heard from them in years, or it's just a quick phone call and they haven't gone into really your lifestyle, your vision, your goals, and all these different kinds of things, then your plan's not going to work more than likely. Your advisor's not doing their job. I meet with most of my clients at least twice a year, no matter what their age is, because things change so quickly this day. You need to rebalance. You need to talk about goals. You need to make sure that you've got all those other pieces like your wills and your financial power of attorneys. And your financial advisor needs to be your point person to make sure that you're staying on track. So that was it. I wanted to keep it pretty short. Obviously, I can go into more details one-on-one with everybody if you have questions. But again, plan now. Make sure you're reviewing your plan and make sure you try to stick to your plan whenever you can. Any questions for me? Anything that anybody has for me?
Go ahead, Kevin. Oh, I thought you had your hand up.
Okay, well, I'll put my email in the chat as well if you want to reach out. We don't charge to sit down or have a conversation or just a discussion. So if anybody has any questions, if anybody ever wants to just sit down and chat about things, look over your current situation, I'd be more than happy to do that. So
Thank you so much, Ken. I wanted to say thank you to all three presenters, because all of Ken and Donna and John, you all have ways that we can talk with you almost one-on-one. Donna and Ken, we can talk to you one-on-one without being charged. And then with John, he does have classes you can go to that are free. And I thoroughly and just I really appreciate that. And I would love to give a shout out for Donna, because I did do pre-planning with her for my dad, and it went really well. And it was so helpful when he did pass. And I just want to say thank you so much. That was a wonderful experience for what it can be. And I'm our last presenter. You guys all know that I am completely head over heels in love with end of life and advanced care planning. So I wanted to share with you a screen. Here we go. So this is on the Community Living Advocates website. It's under the resources tab. If you go to resources and then you go to advanced directives and more, you'll find all of this amazing information that I know everybody wants to have. So let me change something else right now. Hold on. So for this, hold on just a moment. I have to change something. Stop. Let's see. Oops. Okay. So on here is all about advanced care planning. So the first one I wanted to point out was one that Donna actually talked about, which is the disposition of remains. So if you actually do want to use this document, you can go to this website and you can just go ahead and you can bring it up. You can actually print this for free right off the internet. And you can use that so that when you die, someone actually has the legal right to be the custodian of your body, which is a really important document, as she was sharing with us. And also, John was talking about healthcare proxies, which are, I agree with him wholeheartedly, is my favorite legal document that I love to tell people about. And these healthcare proxies are also online, and they are absolutely free. You can print them out and you can do them yourself. It goes through, and it is very thorough. I mean, if you have never seen one, if you've never talked about one, it goes through this line by line, step by step. So you more than likely won't have any questions at the end. Let me just scroll through this with you. It goes through the frequently asked questions, and it tells you all these different things. It tells you what to write in every single line of the healthcare proxy. So if you have any questions, there's all those reference pages, and then the last 2 pages are the actual New York State Department of Health healthcare proxy itself. So you can print this out and you can have your 2 witnesses and you are done with your legal healthcare proxy. So I wanted to share that with you. Oh no, I got rid of it. So it's okay. Just go back to it. So I also wanted to share with you, so advanced care planning is really what you want medically for yourself at end of life or anytime 18 and over. And just for the shortness of time, I just wanted to mention that a lot of people like to fill out their healthcare proxy. You can do organ and tissue donation, which you can do right online. There's a link to that right here. And you can also donate your body to science through Upstate, and that's through the anatomical gift program. Lots of people are interested in that. Another important form, which is this one right here, which you guys all know that I love, is called the MOLST form, and medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, or your DNR, DNI. You can take a look at this right here on the internet. You can find out more information, and you can print one out for yourself. So that's actually what I tell people. I'm like, when you have it, just put it on your refrigerator. That's what we did for my grandma. But you can print one here from the internet just so you can see what it looks like. So before you go talk to your doctor about it, you can go through it yourself. But these do have to be signed by your medical doctor. So this is not something you can do yourself. Let's see, any other paperwork that you might want to do? Disposition of remains. Where to store your healthcare proxy? In a Kinney Life file. You can get them at any Kinney, probably most drugstores, you can put it in there. And then That's it. I just wanted to go over this fairly quickly for you because it is on the website, so you can look it up anytime you want. But it's just, there's just a wealth of information online that is absolutely free and you don't need a lawyer for it. With some you do, some you don't. Power of attorney, I've been told it can be done as a form, you know, that you can take from, I think, the New York State Bar Association. But I've had people tell me that that's not a good route and to absolutely do it through a lawyer, just so you know it's concrete and no one can, you know, contest it. They probably can anyway, but hopefully it'll hold up better. But these are some of the instruments you can use to do your advanced care planning. Does anybody have questions about advanced care planning? I know you do. This is the most exciting topic ever. Come on. Well, just so you know, if you have any of your clients or yourself or your family, if you have any questions about advanced care planning, you know, a healthcare proxy, the DNR, DNI paperwork, doing the organ and tissue donations, if you have that little heart on your license, that means you've already signed up for organ and tissue donation. You can also call the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery Network that's also on the website to see if you've actually signed up. That's the best way to see if you've already signed up to be an organ and tissue donor. And I just let so many people ask me about the anatomical gift program because it's pretty cool. And then, you know, you don't have to have a funeral. You don't have to pay for it if they'll take your body. So, and just so you know, sometimes they say they'll take your body, but then they won't because they're full. So you have to still have your contingent plans anyway, right, Donna? That's right. So it is a great idea, but you still have to plan just in case it doesn't happen. So that's it today. Thanks for coming. Does anyone here that wasn't here earlier that wants to introduce themselves? I think they've already left, actually. So I know Charles was on. And, oh, Lisa's here. Lisa, introduce yourself and tell us who you're with.
Hi, I'm sorry about that. I was running late. So great presentations. I caught all of them. I'm Lisa McCarthy, Associate Care Managers at the Alzheimer's Association. And all of these topics are just so relevant to the conversations that I tend to have with people. So thank you so much. Nancy, I just had a quick question about the handwritten healthcare proxy documents that I've seen that is handed out maybe by healthcare professionals. Is that valid? Like, versus the difference that I've seen is I've actually seen a lawyer created document, a financial power of attorney, and then a healthcare power of attorney or healthcare proxy. And my second piece of that is the healthcare power of attorney the same thing as a healthcare proxy?
Yes. So the second one, yes. So a healthcare power of attorney is another name for a healthcare proxy, okay? And there is written into the law how you have to write out a healthcare proxy. So if you look at the New York State Department of Health example, that is pretty much one of the most simple forms that I've seen, except in that form, they've also put in the, let me just bring it up for you. So you'll see in the very end here, this is the healthcare proxy. So all this side is pretty much as it's written out in the law. And then you see this number 6 here. This is organ and tissue donation. That does not have to be in your healthcare proxy. That's something that they put in just to give people another avenue to put that in writing. But it's very simple. You really just, you state your name, you state who you want to be your healthcare proxy, and you can have an alternate agent. There has to be the ability to have expiration date and the optional number 4, and then you literally sign it, in number 5, and then you have to have witnesses who are 18 years or older. They have to be sane and have to be literate. So there are some caveats. If 2 sane people who are literate, you can get it done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll tell you one, so I'm a nurse, as you guys know, and I have literally filled out countless numbers of healthcare proxies with people. And it is so simple. And so many people, they really want to talk about this. They just don't want to be the ones to bring it up. But once you do break the ice and you start talking about it, it gets so easy. And they're usually really thankful. So, you know, I just want to encourage you to do it yourself, fill out your own healthcare proxy. As you can see now, it's free. You can get it off the internet. And then once you do it yourself, you can talk to someone else who you may want to talk to about it. So what I tell people is, people come to me, they're like, oh my gosh, Nancy, I know you love this stuff. My dad needs a healthcare proxy. Oh my gosh, he needs one so bad. And then I'm like, well, do you have yours done? And then, you know, I get you to do it. And then you could say, hey, Pop, I was just talking to my friend and she had me fill out this form and I was thinking you probably need one too. So let's talk about it. So whenever you're trying to talk to someone about end of life, I encourage people to figure out your own wants and needs and then start talking to that person about what you want and need. And then it just makes it more natural and organic to say, what do you want? Otherwise, you're just saying, so you're going to die soon. What do you want? It just doesn't work well, usually.
You know something, Nancy, it's so fitting that you are doing this in April. When I was in Michigan working in the home care hospice field, we as part of our hospice, we had a lot of ancillary programs. And one of the things that we would do as an activity in education was those playing cards that would ask those questions. And we were encouraged, and I was part of actually, you know, partnered with several of the hospitals to help our partnering hospitals out with their, you know, with the day that they chose, the National Decision Day. It was a big promotion. It was a big promotion that, you know, the hospitals and several home care and hospice agencies helped out with. So, and I had actually doctor's offices even where our particular home care organization used to order the extra copies to just as a value-added service to bring to doctor's offices when I was trying to get in there through the gatekeeper to have a conversation, you know what I mean? So but anyway, so that I actually had mentioned doing, it's really not our role, I guess, to get into that with the Alzheimer's Association and kind of out of my scope, but there's just one of the things that I miss being a part of in the work that I did that is kind of my former life. So I just love this, that you just all your work and all of that, because I just think it's it's so important for people to have a conversation, and we don't want to face it, but we can't assume that any natural tragedy, anything could happen. And then who's left with those decisions? Our loved ones.
Yeah.
In the midst of a painful crisis situation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think any of you guys have been in this organization too long, but every year in April, we do an end of life meeting because April 16th is National Healthcare Decisions Day. And it's a day to celebrate and to bring awareness to end of life planning. So that's why I do it in April every year. So, and I will every year in April, so get ready because this is my favorite topic. So I want to say thank you again to Donna and to Ken and to John, even though he's not here, because I really appreciated your information and speaking today. And if I get any questions, I will forward them on to you as well. Okay. And come back next month. We always do this the third Tuesday at 2:00. And I can't wait to see you all again soon. But this Thursday, we also have Coffee Net. So if you are available at 9:30, love to see you then as well. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.